Right, welcome back. Conversation with Jacques Pauw continues here on the program. Jacques, in terms of beginning this book, I mean, and I have to say, you know, you have been around forever, but I started reading this book over the weekend as well, and I think as much as the rest of South Africa did. But it has to be one of the most magnificently written books. Besides the content, the writing, it captures you from the opening word. And I have to commend you for that, because the writing, it's down to earth. People want to read this. It is information that you can see. It's not highfalutin and technical. It is there. Was that your intention? Was just to write it as a normal person can understand what's going on?
Yeah, you know, I read all the books, all the current affairs books about South Africa, and many of them tend to be quite dull.
Yeah.
And too packed with facts and information. Now, there's lots of facts and information into that. But I did want to write a book that's readable, that people can read and they will continue reading.
Yeah, it is. There's lots of swearing in it, which I enjoy. there's lots of fun. I mean, the opening line on chapter 1, how do you track down a spy in Russia? I mean, say no more. That's probably one of the most impossible things. And yet, you embarked on this journey. You funded the journey yourself. You had retired from journalism. This was not something you wanted to do. You had done enough of this in your life before, exposing spies and corruption all the time. What made you take this on, though?
Well, you know, I left journalism at the end of 2014, and then I started a guest house, restaurant and bar. And I was very merrily cooking away in my kitchen until the end of last year, the end of November, beginning of December last year, when I got a phone call from somebody I knew while I was a journalist, who told me about the fraud and corruption and the fact that there's someone in Russia who might be able to tell me. I suppose when I got this information, I was a bit like a ex-heroin addict that got a needle full of heroin again. I couldn't help inject myself. Because I think I'll always be a journalist. I've been a journalist for 30 years, and it doesn't leave you. It stays with you. And I got the opportunity to do this. When the guy said to me, you know, go and speak to so-and-so, and I said to him, where is he? And he said, in Moscow, in Russia. You know, it probably took me about a day or two, and then I decided I'm going to go for it. I'm going to go and see this man, and then I got other information as well. And that's how it started. And from there on, I started writing and researching.
And there is loads of research. I mean, this just goes into such depth and such details, and you have so much evidence. And this is what I need to ask you. I mean, let's just take one of the allegations of many that have been disputed. I think it's on page 159 of the book, where you talk about a transcript of a meeting or a recorded meeting that confirmed that the SSA acted in the personal interest of President Zuma, which of course goes against its constitutional obligation. Are you in possession of this information? If it's ever needed to be presented in a court of law, are you prepared to present all of this?
Yes, I am. I don't have the documentation and the evidence with me at the moment, because it would be suicide. But I certainly have access to it.
Yeah. And ready to present all of it when and if necessary.
Absolutely.
But obviously your contacts will always remain
you must remember, it's also now a matter if SARS take me to court and they criminally charge me with divulging taxpayers' information, they will have to prove in court that the information that I've divulged in my book is true. I mean, the mere fact that they want me to take me to court already tells you it must be true. Because if I've published lies, it wouldn't be a criminal offense. Might be defamation and whatever, but it's not a criminal offense. So in other words, the fact that they want to take me to court and the fact that they're saying that I've published taxpayers' information means it must be true. Now, if they take me to court, they will have to prove that this is correct. Are they really going to shoot themselves in the foot?
I mean, we saw the president take to Parliament, and we saw opposition parties asking the president, holding up your book in Parliament and referring to many other books that have been written about all of this. The president's response is, it's not my job to respond and talk about these books. If people know about crimes, why don't they go to the police rather?
I must say I shuddered when Musi Maimane held up my book because I got messages afterwards, are you an agent of the DA, for example? You know, so yeah, I mean, you know, I think the president lives in another world, on another planet. It doesn't seem as though he grasps what is wrong in the country and what is going on in the country. The mere fact, for example, that he wants to embark on a R1 trillion nuclear deal that can financially cripple this country, that can lead to a situation where we can't pay social grants and we can't build hospitals and schools, tells us that he's not in touch with reality.
Yeah. I mean, but even the presidency, sorry, not the presidency, but Zizi Kodwa on behalf of the ANC say they refuse to comment on the book. It doesn't even deserve their comment. Do you think it does, or would commenting just get them into further trouble?
Well, somebody told me they're all reading it. So if they regard it as pure nonsense, why don't they just throw it away and ignore it? You know, we've seen, for example, in the last year with the Gupta emails emerging, that there's been almost a conspiracy to silence. You know, if you think about ministers that have been implicated in the Gupta fraud and corruption, people like Des van Rooyen and the Minister of Minerals, Zwane, they haven't commented. There's been hardly ever any comment from them. There hasn't been comment from Duduzane Zuma. There hasn't been comment from the Guptas. So it seems as though that they're simply ignoring this.
Yeah. We've seen some tweets scrolling across the screen, and I think what's worrying people, and I think this echoes it very, very well, on the brink of becoming a gangster state. Jacques, you've investigated a lot of corruption during the apartheid years. I mean, you spoke out so vocally about it. You unveiled many, many things that have led us to the democracy that we find ourselves in as South Africans. And my question to you is, what you have uncovered now, this investigation that you undertook, the places that you went to, the stories that you've heard, have you ever seen corruption in this country at this level before?
No, until quite recently, until a few years ago, we still spoke about corruption in terms of millions. Then came the arms deal. And then we started speaking in terms of billions. And it's very common now to hear $1 billion there and $1 billion there and 500 million went there. And now if we're going to enter into nuclear deals, we talk about $1 trillion. And it's just growing and growing and ballooning.
Yeah.
I haven't made any calculations about how much we've lost, for example, due to the influence of the Guptas, due to the corruption at Eskom, the corruption at Denel, the corruption at PRASA. It's just absolutely staggering. If you look at the figures at PRASA, it's billions after billions after billions of money that's been wasted, money that's been stolen, money that's gone.
What can we as the public do about this? I mean, there are so many books out there. I think I've paid reference to it as well. I mean, we've got Henny van Veeren's Guns and Money, Apartheid, Grand Corruption. There's so much, but what do we do? What can we as South Africans do?
We cannot sit back and say that there's nothing, or feel that there's nothing we can do. Civil society has to rise up against this. And I think civil society has done it. We have to protest. We have to let the government know how we feel. And ultimately, we have to influence the decision-making by the government and by the ANC. People should never forget that people who sit in parliament are their representatives. They've elected them. Those people belong to them. Those people have to keep the president in check. They have to keep parliament in check. They have to report back to the electorate. And people mustn't forget that it's their representatives, it's their democracy, and they need to do something.
Jacques, have you had death threats at all after this?
Yeah, I had 2 death threats on Saturday, and I had quite a nasty one last night. I suppose it comes with a book like this. There's some very, very unhappy people out there. I was in fact on the phone to Ronnie Casserol's last night. We were discussing his new book. And while I was talking to Ronnie, there was a private number coming through, someone who was trying to phone and phone and phone. And at some point, I said to Ronnie, listen, it might be the lawyers. We don't know what's happening. I have to take the call. And when I take it, it was someone who said to me, if you don't stop writing about Jacob Zuma, you're going to be dead. And then put the phone down. You know, I've always thought, because I've had many death threats in my life before, but I've always thought if somebody threatens you, they're not going to do it. It's those ones who don't threaten you. But I'm not overly concerned about it.
So let's close off this interview again. You've got this information. Do you feel that you've done your homework and absolutely everything in this book is true, it's the truth, and you stand by this 100%?
Absolutely.
We leave it there for this morning. Jacques Pauw, thank you for talking to us. We wish you the best of luck with the book going forward. There is a reprint, should be available in stores very, very soon. The President's Keepers, those keeping Zuma in power and out of prison, in conversation with Jacques Pauw.
Thank you very much.
All right, just gone 7 o'clock.